Hey, welcome back, Fiat fans. So today we're going to check out a carburetor on a 1975 Fiat Spider. Now this is a brand new EMPI carburetor, and we're having some trouble with it. It's not idling right. It has some sort of weird hiccup issue like on the secondary here. It seems to be bogging down a lot. And a lot of times when you have a brand new carburetor like this, it doesn't always come set up correct from the factory. So there's going to be a lot of things we're going to check out on this guy. So let's get to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull off the top and actually check the float level.
I took it off.
Oh, did you?
Just
okay.
So you know. And what you're doing is, I took it off and looked at, and the spec is 38.5, and you know, holding it vertical.
The specs that you were actually reading are from the old style float. The new ones have like a different spec. Now there is just the tiniest little circlip on this arm here. Getting that off might be a challenge. I'm holding a magnet here just to help me not lose this little clip. Nice. That's just about one of the tiniest little clips I've ever seen. Now I can pull the choke arm off, and the top of the carburetor carefully lifts off, and here's your float. So there's a lot of contradictory info out there on how to set up the float on these particular carburetors. But first of all, what you want to do is leave the gasket on the surface, because you measure from the gasket, and where you're measuring from is the surface of the gasket to the bottom, or should I say the top of the float. A lot of the older specs say to measure to the bottom, but you should really measure on these newer ones to the top of the float. And when you're measuring, be sure to hold it kind of upright like I have it here. You don't want to have it laying down like this, because it's already starting to press on the ball of the needle valve. And don't hold it open like that either. Hold it, for the first measurement at least, just slightly back so that it's just lightly resting on the needle valve. And the correct measurement is 18 millimeters to the top of this float. And as you can see, this is this is too high up. And when it's all the way down, it should be around 23 millimeters. So what we need to do is take this little tab that the needle rests on and bend it down just a little bit. Now I know you can't see anything because my fat meat hooks are in the way, but what I'm doing is holding onto the float and very gently pulling down on the tab that the needle valve rides on. You want to be very careful doing this because the metal is very thin and it's easy to bend it too far. I bent it with very slight pressure and then rechecked it several times until I got the desired result. Alright, so now we're in the ballpark, and now we're going to flip it up and let the float dangle. And this one needs to be adjusted just a little bit, and if you see this tab on the back here, that's what adjusts how far the float can actually go. Hang down in full droop. So we just push on that guy a little bit, and you see right there, you only want like a couple millimeters of tension on the float, just like that. And this is about how it should look if you're just gonna go by looks and not measurement. The top of the float should be angling pretty close to parallel, but angling just slightly away. And one of the things that concerns me is that whenever the accelerator hits the secondaries in the carb, this thing really binds up. I'm not really sure why that is. I think we're gonna actually have to take the carb all the way off. But that's very easy to do. It's only 4 bolts on here, so let's do that. Alright, so I got the carb all pulled off, and even with it off, there's still some sort of binding whenever it goes to actuate the secondary. So it's a little strange. Alright, so here's what I found on that little hitch that's having. Actuating the secondary itself feels fine. There's maybe just a slight grittiness to that, but that's not really where the problem is. But if I hold the choke open, it actuates nice and smoothly. And what's happening is this little part right here, whenever it engages with, hopefully you guys can see this on here, the accelerator is coming up, like this part right here engages with this little cam right here to push the choke out of the way. And that's what's causing that rubbing. And you know, I think that might just be a function of these cheaper carburetors. You know, these surfaces are gonna be rough, and you know, the carburetor is nice and brand new too. An old worn in carburetor is gonna be nice and smooth, right? Hopefully you guys can see where it's hitting on that cam and causing the issue. Another thing that could be a problem is that the choke could be set entirely too tight. So we need to figure that out as well. But before we get to that, I'm gonna do a little switcheroo on the idle jets. That's a lot easier to do with the carb off the car. So these carbs come like pre-built with a size 60 jet on the primary and a size 50 on the secondary. But really for these 1800 size engines, you really want to switch that around. You want the 50 on the primary and the 60 on the secondary. So let's go ahead and pop these guys out. Once you unscrew the holder, the jet just pops right out. Alright, so I switched the 50 idle jet over to the primary side, and of course the 60 is now in the secondary side. That should help with the 1800 size engine. And so now I'm going to put the top of the carburetor back on, and that way we can start adjusting the choke. Alright, so I just took the choke completely off, and you can see in here, this is a little bimetal spring that whenever electricity is applied, it heats up, and this little spring moves, and that's what causes the choke to open up as the car warms up. And the choke actuator is held on by these little screws like in this ring right here, and you can rotate it like this. And that actually sets the tension of the choke right here. And that's one adjustment that the choke has. But there's another adjustment that the choke has that we need to pay close attention to. Now when the engine is off, your choke is going to be closed like this right here. But whenever the engine actually starts to turn over, it should pop open about 1/8 of an inch, or maybe somewhere around 7 millimeters. And what causes that to pop open like that is this little vacuum valve right here. So as soon as the engine starts pulling vacuum, even with the choke completely cold, it should pop open just a little bit like that. So we need to check the adjustment of this valve right here. And you can see here, this little slide and this little stop right here. Whenever this slides this way, it actuates it to open up like that. And inside here is a little stop that regulates how far this can actually open. So here I have it pushed all the way as far as it'll go. This is how far it'll open as soon as it starts receiving vacuum. And as you can see, it's opening up a little bit more than what it should. So we're gonna have to pop this guy off and adjust the stop in there. And all you gotta do is just take these 3 screws off right here. Now this thing is spring loaded in here, so it's going to try and pop off on you while you're taking the screws out. Don't lose your little spring. And you want to be real careful with this delicate little diaphragm here. This is easily messed up. But if you take a look at this right here, that right there is your stop. And this one to me looks like it's been screwed all the way in. We need to back that out a little bit. Just take some pliers and carefully back it out. This thing was really tight in there, but I was able to clamp down with my pliers really good and go ahead and pull it out. So let's go ahead and check and see. Oh, and you can see this little tube right here, that's where your vacuum reference comes from. So you make sure you get that lined up.
Well, is that normal on, you know, what I'm going to call a stock carburetor, that you have to do all this to?
No, because it would have been set up from the first place. And all the ones that have been on cars for 40 or 50 years, like they were set, you know, decades ago.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I just, you know, but it is unusual to buy a carburetor and have that adjusted that way.
Apparently, especially with these guys, the EMPIs.
Yeah.
They just slap them together, and they don't, you know, really pay attention to adjustments and stuff. Yeah. So, okay, that's looking better. I'm just actuating this little rod right here. Yeah. Just to see. Yeah, and you can definitely see that it's a lot less of a gap in there now. So that little bit's done.
Well, good.
Now we gotta adjust the choke here. You know, like the choke is supposed to be adjusted at 60 degrees. We're never gonna see 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Definitely not during the summer. So it's gonna be a little bit of an approximation. But right now, what I'm doing is I'm turning this just right when it starts to open. So that's like fully closed. And I'm just gonna turn it just where like it just barely starts to open, like right there. Yeah. Like you just saw it, and then you can tighten these guys down. And like I said, it's supposed to be done at 60 degrees Fahrenheit, but we're never gonna get 60 degrees Fahrenheit here. Maybe in December. We'll wait till December and readjust it. Yeah. All right, so I took the top of the carb back off just so it makes it easier to put the carb back on the engine. But before I do that, I'm gonna do the initial setup of the mixture screw. This is idle mixture, and what you do with this is just carefully turn it all the way in, which, yeah, I think that was it. And then you want to back it out 2 full turns. Now once we get this on the car and get the car warmed up and everything, we'll start adjusting this in and out until we find the place where it idles the best. And the other idle adjustment is the idle speed over here. And you can see this screw, it's touching this thing right here. What we want to do is back it off to where it's not touching, and then put it back so it just barely touches right there. It's just barely touching the stop right there. Now once we get the engine all warmed up and everything, and we're ready to adjust these, you always want to adjust the mixture screw first and then bring up your idle speed to where you need your idle. And you never want to screw this in more than 1.5, possibly 2 turns, but it should really only be screwed in 1.5 turns. Because if you start opening up these throttles too far, it's gonna hit the metering ports. In fact, let's see if we can see the metering ports. Yeah, see, it's like right there. Those little holes, like right there. Hopefully you can see. If it goes past that, and you see how that's just a tiny little bit of movement. If it goes past that, you're gonna be dumping a lot of fuel in at idle, and it's just not gonna be good. So let's get this thing back on.
Alright, so we took the car for a short drive to get it all warmed up, and it's already running better than it was before. But we brought it back into the garage so that we could do the final adjustments to the mixture screw and the idle speed. What I'm doing right here is slowly turning in the idle mixture screw, leaning out that idle mixture. And I'm listening for a change in how the engine's running. This is really something you do by ear only. You'll know whenever you hear it start to stumble and stutter, and it sounds kind of like the engine's gonna die. When you hit that point, just go ahead and back it back out until the engine is running smooth again. I wasn't really counting whenever I was screwing the screw in, but this time around I think I screwed it in maybe about 3/4 of a turn from that initial 2-turn out setting. Oh, and if you're wondering what that little golf tee thing is, normally that's where you would plug in your vacuum advance for your distributor, but the Crane ignition system that he's running doesn't use vacuum advance, so he just blocked that off with that golf tee. It's functional. Here, have a listen, see if you can tell what I'm talking about with the idle mixture screw.
See if you can like listen to it. I turn it in and you hear it starts to stumble a little bit,
Yeah.
you know?
That's the sweet spot.
And like
above that.
right above that, so like bring it back. Oh yeah, just like that.
Yeah.
Now I'm turning my attention to the idle speed screw, and I'm going to adjust this until the engine's running at about 800 RPM. And look at that, that's spot on. Well, I hope this helps you all out setting up these carbs. If you aren't already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and give us a thumbs up too. It really helps the channel out. Thanks for watching, see you next time.